I've been driving trucks for 20 years, crisscrossing the country on highways like veins, hauling everything from frozen beef to car parts. My rig, a beat-up Kenworth, knows I 80 better than I know myself. Every curve, every pothole, every lonely stretch. I've seen things out there that don't add up. Shadows that move against the wind, voices in the static of my CB, and once, a coyote that stared at me like it knew my name. But nothing shook me like what I saw on Nebraska's I-80, just west of Sydney, in January 2023. It wasn't a man, wasn't a beast, just ribs, glistening in the dark, standing on the side of the road. And it wasn't just what I saw. It was what it pulled out of me, a memory I'd buried deep. I was running a load of auto parts from Denver to Chicago, a tight deadline that had me pushing through the night. The stretch of I-80 between Sydney and Ogallala is desolate, even by Nebraska standards. Flat, endless plains stretch out under a sky that feels too big, like it's pressing down on you. No towns, no gas stations, just the occasional mile marker and the rare pair of headlights from another rig. The radio was spitting static. Nebraska's got spots where signals just die, so I was alone with my thoughts, the rumble of the engine, and the snow flurries dancing in my high beams. It was around 2 a.m., 10 miles west of Sydney, near the exit for County Road 103. The temperature gauge read -15 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind was kicking up, rattling the trailer. I was sipping burnt coffee from a thermos, trying to stay sharp, when my headlights caught something on the shoulder. At first, I thought it was a deer carcass, maybe hit by another truck and left to freeze. But as I got closer, my stomach twisted. It wasn't a deer. It didn't have a head, skin, or clothes, just ribs like a skeleton's chest, standing upright on the side of the road. No arms, no legs, just a cage of bones, glinting wet in the light, swaying like it was breathing. I slowed the rig, my heart hammering. The thing didn't move toward me, didn't run. It just stood there, maybe 10 feet off the pavement, its ribs pulsing slightly, like lungs were still inside. I couldn't see eyes, but I felt watched. I've hauled through blizzards, dodged tornadoes, and once drove with a busted axle for 50 miles, but I've never felt fear like that, cold, primal, like something ancient was sizing me up. I didn't stop. I floored it, the rig groaning as I pushed it to 70. In the rear view, the thing didn't chase, but it turned like it was tracking me. I kept driving, checking the mirrors every few seconds, expecting to see those ribs lurching out of the dark. My CB was dead, no one to call, and my phone had no bars. Just me, the road, and the memory of that thing burned into my head. Now, I need to tell you about Tommy, because what happened that night wasn't just about the thing on the road. It was about what it dragged up from my past, a story I've never told anyone, not even my ex-wife. Tommy was my cousin, more like a brother, growing up in North Platte, Nebraska, about an hour east of Sydney. We were inseparable as kids, always tearing around the cornfields, sneaking into abandoned barns, and telling each other ghost stories to see who'd crack first. Tommy was fearless, always pushing me to do dumb shit, like climbing the water tower or exploring the old grain silo on County Road 17. When we were 16, in '98, Tommy got obsessed with a local legend about the Hollow Man. Folks in North Platte said it was a spirit, maybe a farmer who'd died in a thresher accident, wandering the backroads at night. They said it had no face, no skin, just bones that moved like a living thing. Kids dared each other to spot it, usually at the old bridge over the South Platte River, near the Hershey turnoff. Tommy, being Tommy, wanted to see it for himself. I told him it was bullshit, just a story to scare kids, but he wouldn't let it go. "Come on, Danny," he'd say. "Don't be a chicken shit. Let's find it." One night, he convinced me. We took his dad's pickup, a rusted Ford, and drove out to the bridge. It was October, cold as hell, the river half frozen. We parked on the shoulder, killed the lights, and waited, passing a stolen cigarette back and forth. Tommy was grinning, hyped up, telling me how we'd be legends if we saw the Hollow Man. I was nervous, but I didn't want to look soft. The night was quiet, just the wind and the creak of the bridge's wooden beams. Then we heard it, a low, wet rasp, like someone breathing through a broken chest. It came from under the bridge. Tommy's grin vanished. I grabbed his arm, whispering we should go, but he shook me off and leaned out the window, shining his flashlight into the dark. The beam caught something, ribs, glistening, no head, no limbs, just a torso of bone hovering a foot off the ground. It turned toward us, and I swear, the air got colder, like it sucked the heat out of the truck. Tommy dropped the flashlight, and I screamed at him to drive. He fumbled the keys, the engine sputtering, and that thing started drifting closer, its ribs flexing like it was sniffing us out. The truck finally roared to life, and Tommy peeled out, tires spitting gravel. We didn't talk the whole way home, just sat there shaking. The next day, Tommy was different, quiet, jumpy. He wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't even look at me. A week later, he ran away. No note, no goodbye. His parents thought he'd just taken off, maybe to Lincoln or Omaha, but I knew better. That thing had marked him. I never saw Tommy again, and I buried that night deep, convincing myself it was a dream, a kid's imagination gone wild. Back to that night on I-80, 25 years later. I drove like hell trying to put miles between me and that thing, but my mind was spinning. It was the same, ribs, no head, no skin, just like what Tommy and I saw. The Hollow Man, or whatever it was, wasn't just a story. It was real, and it was here, on this godforsaken stretch of highway. I kept glancing at the passenger seat, half expecting to see Tommy, like he'd be sitting there, grinning, telling me to man up. Around 3 a.m., I hit a rest stop near Big Springs, just past the I-80/I-76 junction. It was one of those bare-bones setups, 2 picnic tables, a cinder-block bathroom, and a flickering sodium light. I needed to piss and clear my head, so I pulled in, the rig's brakes hissing. The lot was empty, snow piling up on the pavement. I grabbed my flashlight and headed for the bathroom, my boots crunching in the silence. Inside, the bathroom was freezing, the mirror cracked, the sink rusted. I did my business, splashing water on my face, trying to shake the image of those ribs. That's when I heard it, the same wet rasp from all those years ago, coming from the stall behind me. My blood went cold. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand, but the stall was empty, the door half open. I backed toward the exit, my breath clouding in the air, and then I saw it in the mirror. Not my reflection, just ribs floating in the glass like they were standing right behind me. I bolted, sprinting to the truck, my heart pounding so hard I thought it had burst. I locked the doors, cranked the engine, and peeled out, the trailer fishtailing on the icy ramp. I didn't care about the load, the deadline, or the storm. I just needed to get away. But as I merged back onto I-80, I saw it again in the distance, standing on the median. Those ribs, glinting in my headlights, swaying like they were waiting for me. I floored it, pushing the rig to its limit, the speedometer creeping past 80. The thing didn't move, but I felt it watching, like it knew I'd be back. I didn't stop until dawn, pulling into a Love's in Lincoln, 150 miles away. The lot was full of other truckers, the diner buzzing with chatter. I sat in a booth, nursing a coffee, trying to make sense of it. Was it following me? Was it Tommy's Hollow Man, come to finish what it started? I checked my phone, finally back in signal range, and Googled I-80 Sydney, Nebraska monster. Nothing but UFO sightings and Bigfoot rumors. I even searched Tommy's name, hoping maybe he'd turned up somewhere alive. Just an old missing persons report from '98, no leads. I finished the run to Chicago, dropped the load, and took a week off, holed up in a motel. I kept the lights on, barely slept, jumping at every creek. I've been back on I-80 since, but I avoid that stretch west of Sydney, especially at night. I take detours, lose hours, piss off dispatch, but I don't care. I know it's out there waiting. Sometimes, when the radio cuts out and the road feels too empty, I hear that rasp faint like it's riding in the trailer. I don't know what it wants, but it's tied to me, to Tommy, to that night we were stupid enough to look for it. If you're driving I-80 through Nebraska past Sydney, and you see something on the shoulder, ribs, no head, no skin, don't stop. Don't look too long. Just drive, and pray it doesn't follow you home. My only company was the hum of the engine and the occasional jackrabbit darting across the road. I'd been a trucker for 15 years, and nights like this were routine, until they weren't. It was just past 2 a.m. when I pulled into the Pilot Travel Center in Winnemucca, a neon oasis off exit 176. My eyes burned from staring at the road, and my thermos of coffee was long empty. The lot was mostly deserted, just a couple of other rigs parked near the fuel pumps. I stretched my legs, grabbed my wallet, and headed inside for a refill and maybe a stale donut. That's when I saw her. She was standing by the coffee station, pouring cream into a to-go cup. Blonde hair tied back in a messy ponytail, denim jacket, maybe mid-30s. Nothing unusual, except the way she looked at me. Her smile was wide, too familiar, like we'd shared a beer at a bar last week. I'd never seen her before in my life. I nodded politely, the way you do, and moved to the counter to pay. But her eyes followed me, that smile never wavering. It wasn't flirty or threatening, just wrong. like she knew something I didn't. I brushed it off. Long hauls mess with your head sometimes. I paid for my coffee and headed back to my rig, the cold desert air biting through my flannel. As I climbed into the cab, I glanced in the side mirror. She was there, standing in the lot, still smiling, still watching. My stomach twisted. I locked the doors and pulled out, the pilot's lights fading in my rear view. I didn't think much of it until I hit the road again. The I-80 was dead quiet, not another vehicle in sight. About 20 miles east of Winnemucca, near Golconda, my CB radio crackled to life. That was odd. Nobody used CB much anymore, not out here. A woman's voice came through, soft and clear. "Hey driver. You look tired. Why don't you pull over?" I froze. The voice was calm, almost sweet, but it sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed the mic. "Who's this? How do you know what I look like?" No answer. Just static. I scanned the road, half expecting to see headlights tailing me. Nothing but darkness. I turned the CB off, my heart pounding. Maybe it was a prank, some bored trucker screwing with me. But that voice, it sounded like her. The woman from the pilot. I tried to focus on the road, but my mind kept drifting back to a story I'd heard a few years ago at a diner in Elko. Another driver, an old-timer named Carl, had told it over greasy eggs and black coffee. He'd been hauling through Nevada in the 90s, same route as me, when he picked up a hitchhiker near Lovelock. A young woman, blonde, denim jacket, friendly smile. Said her name was Sarah. She seemed normal enough, chatting about the weather, the road. But when Carl glanced at her in the passenger seat, she was staring at him, smiling like she'd known him forever. He got uneasy, asked where she was headed. She just pointed at the road ahead and said, "Keep driving." Carl didn't like it, but he kept going. A few miles later, she started humming a song he didn't recognize, her voice soft but eerie. He glanced at her again, and her smile was wider, unnatural, like her face was stretching. He slammed on the brakes, told her to get out. She didn't argue, just opened the door and stepped into the desert. When Carl looked back, she was gone. No trace, no footprints. He swore he never picked up another hitchhiker after that. The other drivers at the diner laughed it off, called it a ghost story. I'd laughed too. Now I wasn't so sure. The road stayed empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone. My headlights caught a mile marker. Exit 222 Battle Mountain was coming up. I decided to pull over at the Chevron there, clear my head, maybe call my wife. Anything to feel normal. As I approached the exit, my CB crackled again. The same voice. "Don't stop, driver. Keep going. I'm waiting." I yanked the CB's power cord out, my hands shaking. This wasn't a prank. Nobody could know I was planning to stop. I floored it past the exit, my rig roaring through the night. The desert stretched out endlessly, the only light coming from my high beams. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see her standing on the shoulder, that damn smile glowing in the dark. Nothing. Just the road. Around 3:30 a.m., I hit a stretch near Valmy, where the I-80 dips close to the Humboldt River. The air felt heavier, like a storm was brewing, though the sky was clear. My dashboard clock flickered, then went dead. The engine sputtered, just for a second, before catching again. I cursed under my breath, gripping the wheel. Then I saw it. A figure on the side of the road, barely illuminated by my lights. Blonde hair. Denim jacket. Smiling. I swerved, my tires screeching, nearly clipping the guardrail. My heart hammered as I checked the mirrors. She was gone. No way she could have vanished that fast. I told myself it was my imagination, the lack of sleep, the story messing with me. But deep down I knew better. Carl's story hadn't ended with the hitchhiker disappearing. He'd told us about the next night, when he was parked at a rest stop near Carlin. He'd woken up in his sleeper cab to the sound of humming, same eerie tune. His cab door was locked, but when he looked in the mirror, she was there, sitting in the passenger seat, smiling. He screamed, scrambled out of the cab, and ran to the rest stop's payphone to call a tow truck, claiming his rig was broken. He never drove that route again. The other drivers said Carl was half crazy, that he'd imagined it. But the fear in his eyes was real. I kept driving, my knuckles white on the wheel. The clock was still dead, stuck at 3:33 a.m. My phone had no signal, not unusual out here, but it felt deliberate. I was nearing Elko, maybe an hour away, where I could find a proper truck stop, people's safety. I just had to hold it together. Then I heard it. Humming. Soft, melodic, coming from inside the cab. My blood turned to ice. I didn't dare look at the passenger seat. I kept my eyes on the road, my breath shallow. The humming grew louder, closer, like she was leaning toward me. I could almost feel her breath on my neck. "Stop it," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The humming didn't falter. I slammed my fist on the dashboard, shouting, "Stop it!" The sound cut off abruptly, leaving only the drone of the engine. I glanced at the passenger seat. Empty. Of course it was empty. I laughed, a shaky, desperate sound, trying to convince myself I was fine. But I wasn't. When I looked back at the road, she was there, standing in the middle of the I-80, her smile stretching impossibly wide. I yanked the wheel, my rig skidding across both lanes. The world tilted, tires screaming, and for a moment, I thought I'd roll. The truck righted itself, shuddering to a stop on the shoulder. I sat there, panting, sweat dripping down my face. The road was empty again. I didn't move for a long time. I couldn't. My hands trembled as I checked every mirror, every window. Nothing. Just the desert, silent and vast. I thought about Carl, about how he'd quit the route, how he'd looked like a man who'd seen something he couldn't unsee. I understood now. I made it to Elko just before dawn, pulling into the Flying J off exit 298. The lot was busy with early morning truckers, and the normalcy of it, clinking coffee mugs, diesel fumes, bad fluorescent lights, felt like a lifeline. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Who'd believe me? I filed my logbook, grabbed a shower, and called my wife. Her voice grounded me, but I didn't mention the woman. I couldn't. I've driven the I-80 since, but never at night and never alone. I keep my CB off and my doors locked. Sometimes when the road gets quiet, I think I hear humming, faint and distant. I tell myself it's the wind, the tires, anything but her. But I know better. She's out there, somewhere along that lonely stretch, smiling like she knows me. And I'm terrified that one day she'll be right. My name's Ray, and I've been hauling freight across the lower 48 for 15 years. I've seen my share of weird shit. UFOs over Nevada, shadow figures on I-80, even a pack of coyotes that looked too human in the moonlight. But nothing compares to what I saw at the Love's Travel stop off I-40 in Shamrock, Texas, in the summer of 22. This wasn't fatigue, no matter what anyone says. I know what I saw, and it's burned into my brain like a brand. It was late July, and I was running a load of auto parts from Memphis to Phoenix. I'd been pushing hard, trying to beat a deadline, and my logbook was screaming for a break. By the time I hit Shamrock, it was pushing 2 a.m., and the Texas Panhandle was dead quiet. Nothing but flat, dark plains stretching out under a sky full of stars. The Love's at exit 163 was a familiar stop. I'd grabbed coffee there plenty of times. It's a big place, with a 24-hour diner, a McDonald's, and rows of pumps under harsh sodium lights. That night, though, the lot felt off. Too still, like the air was holding its breath. I parked my Kenworth near the back of the lot, away from the idling reefers, and killed the engine. The silence hit me hard, no wind, no crickets, just the faint hum of the Love's sign. I grabbed my thermos and headed for the diner, figuring a burger and some caffeine would keep me going. Inside, the place was near empty. A waitress named Carla, who I'd seen on other runs, was wiping down the counter. A lone trucker sat in a booth, nursing a coffee, his eyes glued to his phone. I slid onto a stool, ordered a double cheeseburger, and stared out the window while I waited. That's when I saw her. Across the parking lot, near the edge where the pavement meets the scrubland, a figure stood under a flickering light pole. It was a woman, or at least it looked like one. She was wearing a white dress, the kind you'd see in old photos, long and flowing. Her hair was dark, hanging loose, and she was just standing there, facing away from me. I squinted, trying to make out details, but the light kept stuttering, making her flicker like a bad TV signal. I figured she was a lot lizard or maybe a hitchhiker, but something about her didn't sit right. She wasn't moving, not even a sway, and nobody else seemed to notice her. I asked Carla, "You see that lady out there?" She glanced up, frowned, and shook her head. "Ain't nobody out there, hon. You need more coffee?" I forced a laugh, but my skin was crawling. I kept watching. The woman hadn't budged, but now she was facing me. I couldn't see her face, too far, too dark, but I felt her eyes on me, heavy like a weight pressing on my chest. My burger came, but I barely touched it. I paid quick and headed back to my rig, telling myself it was nothing, just road jitters. Back in the cab, I locked the doors and tried to settle in for a few hours' sleep. I pulled the curtains, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. I kept picturing her out there, standing under that busted light. Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and decided to roll out. I fired up the truck, the Cummins roaring to life, and checked my mirrors. That's when my heart stopped. She was standing right behind my trailer, maybe 20 feet away. The same white dress, the same dark hair. But now I could see her face, or where her face should have been. It was blank, just smooth, pale skin, no eyes, no mouth, nothing. My hands froze on the wheel. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but she was still there, silent, unmoving. Then she raised a hand, slow, like she was reaching for me. I slammed the truck into gear and peeled out, tires squealing on the asphalt. I didn't look back until I hit the I-40 on-ramp. The rest of the drive to Amarillo was a blur. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see her in the road. At a Flying J in Amarillo, I finally stopped, hands shaking as I poured coffee. I overheard a couple of old-timers at the counter talking about Shamrock. One mentioned a ghost, a woman in white who haunts the Loves, tied to a murder back in the 90s. Supposedly, she was killed in a botched robbery at the truck stop, left to die in the scrubland. They said she shows up on quiet nights, looking for someone to help her, or maybe to drag them into whatever hell she's stuck in. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that blank face. I've been back to Shamrock since, but never at night and never alone. I asked Carla about it on a later run. She got real quiet, then said, "Some things you just don't talk about, Ray." I checked online, found a few forums where drivers mentioned weird shit at that Loves, shadows, cold spots, a woman who vanishes when you get close. One guy swore she knocked on his door, but when he opened it, nobody was there. I'm not a superstitious guy. I've driven 1,000,000 miles, seen sunrises in every state, and laughed off most ghost stories. But that night in Shamrock wasn't fatigue or a trick of the mind. I saw the silent specter, and she saw me. If you're hauling through the panhandle and stop at that Loves, keep your doors locked and your eyes on the shadows. She's out there waiting, and she's not just a story. I've been hauling freight across the Southwest for nigh on 20 years, and let me tell you, the road's got stories that'd make your hair stand on end. Most of them, I chalk up to long hours, bad coffee, and the way the desert plays tricks on your eyes at night. But what happened to me out near Tucumcari, New Mexico, back in the spring of 23? That's something I can't shake, no matter how many miles I put between me and that stretch of I-40. I was running a load of auto parts from Phoenix to Oklahoma City, a route I've done so many times I could drive it blindfolded. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning, and I was cruising along, the hum of my Kenworth's engine keeping me company. The sky was clear, stars bright enough to make you feel small, and the road was empty save for the occasional jackrabbit darting across. My CB was quiet, and I'd switched off the radio after the 3rd round of the same old country tunes. Just me, the road, and the rhythm of the white lines. Somewhere west of Tucumcari, where the railroad tracks run parallel to the highway, I started feeling off. Hard to describe, but it was like the air got heavy, like when a storm's brewing, only there wasn't a cloud in sight. I shook it off, figured I was just tired. Been pushing hard to make up time after a delay at the shipper. I cracked the window, let the cool desert air slap me awake, and kept my eyes on the road. That's when I saw him. Up ahead, maybe 100 yards, there was a figure walking along the tracks to my right. Now that ain't exactly unusual. Folks sometimes wander out there, though it's rare at that hour in the middle of nowhere. But something about this guy caught my eye. He wasn't moving like a hiker or a drifter. His steps were slow, deliberate, like he was pacing out something important. He was dressed funny, too old-fashioned, like something out of a Western movie. Long coat, wide-brimmed hat, boots that looked too worn for the modern world. I slowed down a bit, keeping him in my peripheral, trying to make sense of it. As I got closer, I saw his face. Or at least, I thought I did. The moonlight hit him just right, and for a split second, I swear he turned and looked straight at me. His eyes, God, I'll never forget, were hollow, like he was seeing something I couldn't. My heart started pounding, and I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of the light, but deep down I knew better. I kept driving, glancing over every few seconds, but he didn't move off the tracks. Just kept walking, head down now, like he was lost in thought. By the time I passed him, I was doing maybe 50, slower than I should have been, but I couldn't help it. I watched him in my side mirror, expecting him to fade into the dark. But he didn't. He just stopped. Stood there, facing the tracks like he was waiting for something. I don't know why, but I pulled over a mile or so down the road. My hands were shaking, and I needed a minute to get my head straight. I lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and tried to laugh it off. "You're losing it, Bobby," I muttered to myself. Too many late nights. But the feeling wouldn't go away. That man wasn't right. Something about him was wrong, like he didn't belong in this world. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, debating whether to turn back. Part of me wanted to check if he was still there, see if he needed help. Another part, the part that's kept me alive all these years, screamed to keep driving and never look back. In the end, curiosity got the better of me. I tossed the cigarette, fired up the rig, and made a U-turn, heading back toward Tucumcari. When I got to the spot where I'd seen him, the tracks were empty. No sign of the man, no footprints in the dirt, nothing. I idled there for a bit, scanning the darkness, but it was like he'd never been there at all. I should have felt relieved, but instead I felt worse. Like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. The rest of the drive to Oklahoma City was uneventful, but I couldn't stop thinking about that man. By the time I dropped my load and checked into a motel, I was a wreck. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I kept seeing his face, those empty eyes staring right through me. Finally, I called up an old buddy of mine, Ray, who's been driving longer than I have and knows every ghost story from here to El Paso. "Ray," I said after we'd shot the breeze for a bit, "you ever hear about anything weird out by Tucumcari? Like on the tracks?" He got real quiet, which ain't like Ray at all. "What did you see, Bobby?" he asked, his voice low. I told him everything, the man, the clothes, the way he looked at me. When I finished, Ray let out a long sigh. "You ain't the first, brother," he said. "Folks been seeing him for years. Always at night, always on those tracks. Story goes, he was a rail worker back in the 50s. Died in 52, I think. Got caught in a derailment, tore him up bad. They say he's still out there, walking the line like he's trying to finish his last shift." I felt my stomach drop. "You're messing with me, right?" "Wish I was," Ray said. "I seen him once myself, back in 98. Same deal, old clothes, weird vibe. Scared the hell out of me. You don't talk about it much, 'cause folks'll think you're crazy, but you ain't alone, Bobby." I hung up feeling worse than before. Ray's a straight shooter, not the type to spin yarns. If he said it happened, it happened. I spent the next few days in a daze, replaying the encounter in my head. When I got back to Tucumcari on my return run, I stopped at a diner and asked around, real casual-like. The waitress, an older gal named Connie, overheard me and leaned in close. "You talking about the track walker?" she whispered, like she didn't want the other customers to hear. "My granddaddy used to tell stories about him. Said he was a good man, worked the rails his whole life. Name was Samuel, I think. Died in a bad wreck out there. Folks say he don't rest easy, 'cause they never found all of him after the crash." I didn't know what to say to that. I just nodded, paid my bill, and got the hell out of there. But I couldn't let it go. Back home, I started digging. Found some old newspaper archives online. Articles about a derailment near Tucumcari in April 1952. Sure enough, a worker named Samuel Hargrove was killed. The details were gruesome. Train jumped the tracks, crushed him under a freight car. They recovered most of his body, but not all of it. The article mentioned he was a quiet man, kept to himself, always wore a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. That was enough for me. I stopped taking loads through Tucumcari after that. Found other routes, even if it meant less pay. I didn't care. I couldn't face those tracks again, not knowing what I know. Some nights, when I'm out on the road and the world's too quiet, I still see him in my mind, walking slow, head down, like he's got nowhere to go and all the time in the world to get there. I ain't a religious man, but I pray I never see him again. And if you're ever out that way, driving late at night, keep your eyes on the road. 'Cause the desert's got secrets, and some of them ain't meant to be seen. It was late April, and I was running a load of auto parts from Salt Lake City to Casper. The dispatcher had warned me about a storm rolling in, but my rig, a 2019 Freightliner with 600,000 miles and a temperamental clutch, could handle a little snow. Problem was, a jackknifed semi had closed the main route, and my GPS rerouted me onto 191, then onto a narrow cut-off locals used to bypass construction. That's how I found myself on the Devil's Spur, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The road was a snake, winding through low hills dusted with sagebrush. No streetlights, no guardrails, just my headlights slicing through the dark. The radio crackled with static, unable to hold a signal, so I was left with the drone of the engine and my own thoughts. I'd driven worse roads, but something about this one felt wrong. The air was heavy, like the calm before a twister, and my CB stayed silent. No chatter from other truckers, which was odd for a detour route. Around mile marker 13, I saw it. A figure standing on the shoulder, thumb out. Hitchhikers aren't rare, but this guy was strange. He wore a long duster coat, hat pulled low, and stood stock still, like he wasn't cold despite the wind kicking up. I slowed, debating. Company policy says no passengers, but leaving someone out here felt cruel. As I passed, his head turned, and I swear his eyes caught the light like a coyote's. I kept going, unease crawling up my spine. 10 minutes later, my eyelids started to droop. I'd been on the road 12 hours, and the spur's endless curves were hypnotic. I cracked window, letting the cold snap me alert, and popped a stick of gum. That's when I noticed the mile marker, 13 again. I blinked, thinking I'd misread it, but there it was, the same rusted sign, same sagebrush. My odometer hadn't budged either. I checked my watch, 11:47 p.m. I'd been driving 30 minutes, but the clock hadn't moved. My heart kicked up a notch. I'm not superstitious, but I've heard stories, truckers talking about roads that loop, places where time gets sticky. I floored it, watching the speedometer climb to 70, reckless for a road this tight. The rig groaned, but I didn't care. I just wanted off. 5 minutes later, there it was again, mile marker 13. My mouth went dry. I checked my phone, no signal, no GPS, just a blank screen. The CB was dead silent. Then I saw him again. The hitchhiker, same spot, same pose. This time he raised his head as I approached, and I caught a glimpse of his face, pale, hollow, with a grin that stretched too wide. I swerved, tires squealing, and gunned the engine. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel, muttering a prayer I hadn't said since I was a kid. The road seemed to fight me, the curves sharpening, the darkness pressing in like it was alive. I don't know how long I drove, hours maybe, though my watch still read 11:47. The hitch dash, Kerr appeared every few miles, always at marker 13, always closer to the road. Once, he was so near I thought I'd clip him, his coat flapping in my draft. I screamed at him to get lost, but he just stood there, grinning. My fuel gauge started dropping, though I'd filled up in Evanston. The rig's lights dimmed, and the engine sputtered, like something was siphoning its life. Desperate, I tried the CB again, calling into the void. "This is Big Blue, anyone copy? I'm stuck on the spur, mile 13. Somebody please." Static. Then a voice, low, raspy, not human. "You shouldn't have passed me by." I ripped the headset off, heart pounding. That's when I remembered an old trucker's tale about the spur. A drifter who'd died there decades ago, run off the road by a semi. They said he haunted the route, hitching rides, trapping drivers who refused him. I wasn't about to test the story. The next time I saw him, I slowed down. My hands trembled as I leaned over and popped the passenger door. "Get in," I croaked, voice barely audible over the wind. The figure didn't move, just tilted his head, like he was studying me. Then slowly he stepped forward. The air grew colder, my breath fogging despite the heater. He reached the door, and I saw his hand, bony gray, nails like claws. I slammed the door shut and floored it, screaming, "Stay away." The road bucked under me like it was angry. The rig fishtailed, tires screeching, but I held on. Ahead, a faint glow appeared, not headlights, but dawn. The sky was lightening, the hills taking shape. I passed mile marker 14, then 15, and the road widened, merging back onto 191. My watch ticked to 11:48. The fuel gauge stabilized, the engine purred. I pulled onto the shoulder, shaking, and sat there until the sun was fully up. I made it to Casper, delivered the load, and told the dispatcher I'd never take that cutoff again. He laughed, said I was spooked by nothing. But I looked up the spur later. Locals avoid it. They say drivers go missing there, or come out changed. One old-timer swore he'd picked up a hitchhiker on that road, only to find his cab empty at the next stop. I don't know what I saw, but I know it was real. The devil's spur didn't just keep me awake. It clawed into me, left a mark I can't shake. I stick to the interstates now, keep my CB on, and pray I never see mile marker 13 again. Some roads don't let you sleep. Some don't let you go.